In this video, we're going to learn how to set up frame-by-frame animations and then script them in our player controller script and using the Animator component. So the first thing we want to do is set up our animations, and to do that I'm going to click the knight. And the first thing you want to do on any object that you want to animate is you have to add this Animator component. So I'll click it and I'll add it for now, and we'll go through what it does in just a little bit. But we want to set up the animations first. So if I click on Window, I can click here on Animation. So the shortcut is Control 6, and a different window will pop up. And it's telling me to begin animating my knight, create an animation clip. So I'll click Create. And I want to go into my animations folder, and I'll save the first one as idle. And it saves it as a anim file type. Now it's asking me to put in the frames. Right, so frame by frame and keyframe animation will both be done in here. I'm only going to show you frame by frame just to keep it simple. So to do the frame by frame, I'm going to go into my sprites and I'll look at my knight files, and whoever created these knight assets created a whole bunch of frames that can be animated. So if I click on one of these, you can see here at the bottom of the inspector that they've given it a name. So this is Knight Attack 1, and it goes all the way till Knight Attack 6. For this video, we just want to set up a idle, a walking, and a jump animation. So I'll come down here and look for the idle ones. So there's one here, and there's 6 of them. And if I click them, I can just drag them straight onto this animation window. So similar to other animation programs, you have a time frame and then you have frames down here. Right, so each of these is a single frame. And so far, my whole animation is taking up about 6 seconds, so about 1 second per frame. Now, if I play it, so I can play it up here, press play, you'll notice here in the scene that my knight is actually playing the animation, and I can also look, if you have the game screen open, it'll play the animation in the game. So I'll stop that. That's a little bit too fast for my liking. So if I highlight all of these frames, these 2 blue bars appear here on the sides, and if I click and drag those, I can slow down the animation or speed it up. Right, so mine's going too fast. I'm going to put it to about, say, 10 seconds. And now if I press play, the animation looks a little better. So I'm going to stop that there. And I'm going to set up my walking animation by creating a new animation. So if I click here where it says idle, I can create a new clip, and then I'll call this walk. And I'm just going to come down here to my assets and look for the walk frames and drag that straight on. And I'm going to spread that out straight away till about, I don't know, say 10. Press play. Yep, that looks fine. And I want to do the same for a jump. And for the jump animation, I'm actually only going to use one frame. Just because with jumps you need to time it a little bit better. So here I'm just going to take this one jump frame, and if I press play, you can see what it looks like. So when I'm in the air or I'm falling, I just want my legs to be spread out like that. Cool, so that's all my animations created. The next thing I want to do is come up here to the Window tab and open up the Animator window. And this comes up. If I select my knight, a few different things appear. So these are all the animations that it sees. We'll go into the entry exit at any state soon, but those are the three we just created. The reason idle is highlighted in orange is that's the default animation. So as soon as the game starts, it's going to start playing that animation. If I want to change the default animation, I can just right click on any of these others and set layer as default state. So now the walk is the default animation. I'll change that back. Now if one of these aren't in here, so say if your walk's not in there, I'll just delete it. You can come here to Assets, go to your Animations folder, and then just drag and drop that anim file, and that will show up now in your Animator screen. So I'm going to just drag these like that. Now, before these animations can play, I need to set up what's called transitions. So each of these arrows is called a transition. I can't do anything to this default transition, but to create one, I can click on the animation, click on Make Transition, and click on the new animation. And all that's saying is if I'm idling, I want to be able to transition to the walk animation if a certain condition is met. Like if I press the right button, right, I want to change my animation from idle to walk, or something like that. We'll set up the conditions in a bit. I also want to create one to jump, because I can jump from an idle state. Do I want to be jumping while I'm walking? Well, yes. So I want to be able to jump in the middle of a walk. And then same thing all the way around. If I'm jumping, do I want to move back to idle? Yes, I do. If I'm jumping, do I want to move back to walk? Yes, I do. And if I'm walking, do I want to move back to idle? Yes, I do. So all of these go each way. Now there's some animations that won't go both ways, but we'll get to that in future videos. After we've created this, I'm just going to press play so you can see what it does in the game. So if you can look here in the animator screen, you can see that it's just playing all these animations one after the other. And you can see that in my character. I am idling, running, jumping, etc. So I'll stop the game there. And the way we stop that from happening is by giving these a condition. So if I click on each of this transition, down here in my conditions panel, it says list is empty. And if I try and add one by clicking plus, it says parameter does not exist. So in the animator, we have to give it conditions by referring to what's called a parameter. And the parameters are just up here. So in your animator tab, you have a parameters sub tab inside of it. It says list is empty, but I can click on this plus sign here to add one. Now all these work a similar way. If you haven't watched the video on variables, watch that, but essentially a float is just a decimal point number, an integer is a whole number that can be positive or negative, and a boolean is a true or false variable. So we're going to use an integer just for the sake of making it easy. I'm just going to call it state. You can call it whatever you want. But you have to remember what this is, what the name is, because that's what we're going to refer to when we start scripting, right? And 0 you usually want to be your default state. So every single arrow that's pointing towards your default, so idle is my default, I want to click it, and then now when I go to press plus on the condition, it comes up with that state name that I just created, right? And we want to say when it's equal to 0. So when state is equal to 0, if I'm at jump, I'm going to transition to idle. And I want to do the same for walk. So when I'm walking and in the script, if I want state, if I change state in the script to equal 0, I want to transition from the walk to the idle animation. Then you just choose a value for the others. So for example, I want my walk to be number 1. So every arrow that's pointing towards walk, I want to click on it, and I just want to add a condition to say it equals 1, right? And then same from jump to walk, I want to add it so to transition when my state equals 1, and then I'll make my jump 2. So if I'm idling and I change my state to 2, I want it to transition to the jump animation. And same thing with the walk to jump. When state equals 2, I want to transition to that animation. Good. Now, if we play the game, nothing, well, I'll show you. So if I play the game, nothing's happening. All I'm doing is playing my default animation, which is idle, over and over again. And that's just because none of these conditions are being met. Like if I move right, left, etc., jump, I'm still just playing that default animation. So I'll stop the game, and we'll go into the script, and we'll use the script to set those transitions, or set that state parameter. And the first thing you want to do is create a empty animator object. So I'll create one called animator, and I'll call it this animator. And then in my start script, I'll say this animator is equal to get component. Whoops. Just like that. And all that's doing is first creating a empty animator object. And when I say animator object, I mean a empty version of this animator component. Right? So it's just empty. It's just a random one. And then in the start function, we're setting it to get the animator from whatever we attach this script to. So if I attach this script to platform 3, it will look on platform 3 for an animator component. But this script, which is the player controller script, is attached to the night. So when it goes start, it will come and find all this information, so the animator information for my night, and it will save it inside there, so I can do stuff with that animator. Okay, and then to set the states, I'm just going to use a if statement, right? But we'll set the state for jump first. If you don't know what an if statement is, just watch the video on if statements earlier. But in the condition, I'm going to check my y velocity. And I'm going to do that. And all that's saying, so this exclamation mark just means not. So if it's before an equal sign, that means not equal to. So I'm saying if my y velocity from a rigid body is not equal to 0, I want to do something. And remember, your y velocity is only equal to 0 when you're standing completely still in the y direction, i.e. you're not moving up or down. And I'm just going to say this animator, and all animators have a method. So if you don't know what that is, go watch the video on functions and methods, called setInteger. And if you used a boolean or a trigger, it has a setBool and setTrigger as well. And that setInteger method takes in two pieces of information. The first is the name of the parameter, so state, and the value you want to set. So I made my jump number 2. Right, so no matter what I'm doing, if my velocity is not equal to 0, which means I'm either falling or rising into the air, I want to change my state parameter inside my animator to 2. And then inside the animator, it's going to transition to that animation that I set as my jump animation. So I'll save that and we'll just test this. And you can see I'm already in my jump animation, and that's just because when I started the game I fell down, and as I was falling I moved. And I haven't set it to go back to my idle animation when I'm not jumping, and I can just do that with an else. So I'll just add an else block to this if statement, and I'm just going to say this animator dot set integer state and I made idle my 0 state. So now when I press play, I'm there idling. When I jump, it changes. Now there is a bit of a delay when I press space and when it transitions, and then when I land and when it transitions back to the idle. And don't worry about that for now, we'll fix it at the end of this. But now I want to set up my walking animation. If you're a beginner, you might think I just have to come down here and set it like this. So similar to how I did the jump. Right? But the problem with doing it this way is if I'm jumping, so think about when my code's executing. If I'm jumping, it's going to move towards my jump animation, right? And then in the same frame, if I'm jumping and moving forward, which this is true, it's going to move to my running animation. So I'll be in mid-air and then I'll be running at the same time. Now, to counter this, instead of using another if down here, I have to use a else if block, like so. And I'll just cut this, paste it up there. And then I'll just set this animator dot set integer, and I want my state to change to 1. Now, in a if else block, right? If this becomes true, it's going to break out of this. So if I'm jumping, it'll come and execute this line of code, and then it's going to ignore the rest of this if else if block. So the order in which you put your ifs and your else ifs does matter. You want whichever one you want to take precedence to be all the way at the top, because that'll break. So if I'm jumping and moving forward, it's going to read this because I'm going to be in the air. It'll execute this and then it'll ignore all the rest of this. Right? If I set this inside of here, so if I put that in reverse direction, if I'm moving forward and jump, right, it will see that I'm moving forward, play this, and then not end up playing my jump animation. So that's important. Okay, so I'll just save that and go test it. Okay, so my idle animation's playing. If I jump, it plays my jump animation with a delay. And if I move forward, if I move, right or left, it will play my walking animation, but with a bit of a delay. Now, to prevent the delay, I'll go back to my animator, and I'll click on this transition. And this transition, if you see over here, you have a whole group of settings that you can play around with, right? The first one is you want to undo exit time. Has exit time just means it has to play for a certain amount of time before it'll exit. So we'll uncheck it so we can transition smoothly. It doesn't have to play out the full animation before it'll exit. And then down here, you have a transition duration, which is just the amount of time in between the previous animation and the new animation. So I'm just going to make that 0.1 so it feels a bit snappy. And I want to do that for all of these. There you go. And then now when I go back to my game, just click out of it and press play. My jump's much smoother. And so is my run. Right. Not perfect, but close enough for a simple game for now. That's it for this video. In the next video, we'll get to working on shooting bullets. So shooting bullets, fireballs, things like that. And then also registering when you fall off. So it'll cause your character to die when you fall off.